I'd been driving for hours, the road stretching endlessly ahead of me under the harsh, buzzing streetlights. My eyes were heavy, the hum of the engine lulling me into a trance. I needed a place to sleep. It had been a long day on the road, and when I saw the faded sign for the Silver Pines Motel, I didn't hesitate to pull in. It was one of those places where you could tell nothing good had happened in a while, dilapidated neon lights flickering above a row of empty, silent rooms. Inside, the clerk was an older man with a thick beard and eyes that seemed to have seen far too much. He didn't smile, didn't ask any questions, just slid me a key with a number scrawled on a piece of paper. "Room 8, he said, his voice gravelly. As I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something, a shadow moving at the end of the hall. I shook it off. The place was old. People moved weirdly in these motels. It wasn't until I reached room 8 that I started to feel uneasy. Something about the place just didn't sit right. The door creaked as I entered. Dust danced in the air like tiny ghosts, and the musty smell hit me immediately. I flicked the light switch, nothing. Great. I had no choice but to leave the door open to get some light from the hallway. I threw my bag on the bed and sat down, rubbing my temples. The day's exhaustion hit me hard. I needed sleep. I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, no one was there. Just the empty hallway, dimly lit and still. Strange, but I figured it was some mistake or someone else's room. I was about to close the door when I noticed something. The shadow that had caught my eye earlier was still there, standing at the far end of the hallway. Just standing still, unmoving. It wasn't the clerk, he was gone by now. No one else was around. I shut the door quickly, my heart pounding. Was it just my mind playing tricks on me? I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to the exhaustion. But as I lay down, the unease in my gut grew. Something was wrong. The room felt too silent. Too empty. That night, I wouldn't sleep. Not at all. I couldn't shake the feeling that the room was closing in on me. The silence was deafening, like the air itself had become heavy, pressing down on me. I tried to distract myself, flicked through the TV channels, but the screen was just static. Another thing that should have seemed normal, but didn't. The buzz of the static was unsettling, like it was trying to say something. I turned it off. Then, I heard it. A soft scratching sound, coming from the corner of the room. At first, I thought it was just the wind, maybe a stray branch tapping against the window. But the scratching didn't stop. It grew louder, almost like it was deliberate. I hesitated, wondering if my mind was playing tricks. But curiosity gnawed at me, so I got up and walked over to the corner where the sound was coming from. There was nothing there. I ran my hand along the wall, feeling for any sign of what might have caused the noise. The wallpaper was peeling in places, old and brittle, but no hidden compartments or any sort of opening. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard it again. This time, it was coming from behind the bed. I moved slowly, my breath shallow, heart pounding in my ears. I had to know what it was. I pulled the bed away from the wall. Nothing. But there was a small crack in the floorboard, barely noticeable. It was odd, but I wasn't sure why. Something about the crack seemed deliberate, like it was hiding something. My fingers twitched as I crouched down to examine it. The scratching sound, closer now, like it was right under the floor, stopped. And then, from the crack, a finger emerged. Thin and pale, so pale it looked almost lifeless. I froze, my heart stopping in my chest. The finger wiggled slightly, and I could feel a chill spread through the room as if the temperature had dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Before I could react, the finger retreated. A deep, almost inhuman voice whispered from the crack, but the words were incomprehensible. My blood ran cold. I stumbled backward, barely managing to keep my balance as the room seemed to spin around me. I slammed the bed back into place, trapping the floorboard beneath it. I couldn't stay in this room anymore. I couldn't even think straight. My mind was racing, the only clear thought being, get out. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the door. But just as I reached for the handle, it slammed shut by itself. I twisted the knob, pulled, pushed. Nothing. I turned, breath quickening, but the hallway outside was empty. Not a soul in sight. But I wasn't alone. I was trapped. There was no other way to describe it. The door refused to open, and every instinct in my body screamed to get out of that motel. I backed away from the door, trying to stay calm, but my heart was racing, my palms sweating. I turned to the room behind me, hoping maybe something had changed. Maybe there was a way to escape. But as I looked back at the room, I noticed something else, something I hadn't seen before. The shadow that had been standing at the end of the hallway earlier, it was closer now. A chill ran down my spine as I stared at the figure. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and it stood motionless in the dim light, staring directly at me. My breath caught in my throat, and I instinctively took a step backward. I could feel its presence even from here, like it was pulling me in, suffocating me with its gaze. I didn't know how long I stood there, paralyzed by fear. All I could hear was the pounding of my heart and the distant hum of the motel's creaking pipes. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, it just watched. Then, without warning, it stepped forward. Slowly. Purposefully. Each step echoing through the empty hall. I backed away from the door, my legs barely able to hold me upright. I reached for my phone, praying for a signal, but the screen remained dark, no service, just an empty bar. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, tightening my throat. The figure was still coming, and I had nowhere to go. I turned to the bathroom, slamming the door behind me, but it didn't offer any comfort. It was just a small, cramped space with peeling tiles and a cracked mirror. My reflection was distorted, almost like it wasn't even me anymore. I leaned against the sink, breathing heavily, trying to steady myself, when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside the bathroom door. It wasn't the shadow anymore. There was something else, something, closer. Something real. The door handle rattled. Then, it turned. I wasn't sure how long I stayed crouched there, holding my breath, but when the door finally creaked open, there was no one on the other side. The hallway was empty. Except, of course, for the figure. It stood at the end of the hallway once again. But now, it was closer than before. So much closer. And that's when I realized, it was no longer watching me. It was waiting. I turned and bolted, no longer caring about anything except getting out. I ran. My feet hit the floor, pounding in a rhythm that matched the frantic beat of my heart. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to get away. I slammed through the bathroom door, past the bed, and to the other side of the room, desperate to get to the window. I didn't even look back, something told me I shouldn't. But I could feel it, getting closer with every step. The air felt thick, heavy, as if the very walls were closing in on me. The window was stuck. Of course, it was. The worst part was that I wasn't even surprised. I tried yanking at it, prying it open with all the strength I had left, but it wouldn't budge. My fingers were slick with sweat, my muscles aching from the panic. Then, I heard it. The footsteps again. Slow. Measured. Like something was savoring the hunt. I twisted and turned, my mind racing for an exit, but the room offered nothing. There were no other windows, no back door, and certainly no way out. I was running out of time, and I could feel that thing, whatever it was, getting closer. I heard the creak of floorboards behind me. I couldn't breathe. I spun toward the door, but I froze. The figure was standing there, in the doorway. It wasn't just standing, though. It was looming. The height of it, unnatural, like it stretched endlessly upward, and the way the shadows clung to its form, consuming the light around it, made it look almost like it wasn't a person at all. Its face was hidden in darkness, just a shape, but the air around it felt suffocating. I stumbled back, my back hitting the window frame. There was no way out. And then, I heard its voice. It was low, guttural, like it was pulling words from the depths of something ancient. "Leave," it rasped. "You shouldn't be here." I couldn't speak. I couldn't even move. All I could do was stare at it, my mind scrambling for some kind of escape plan that didn't exist. The figure took a step forward. I bolted. I didn't care where I was running, didn't care if I made any noise. I was only focused on one thing, getting away. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, the doors blurring as I ran past them, slamming into walls, tripping over furniture, anything to keep distance between me and that thing. But I could hear it. Closer. Faster. It was following me. I could feel the cold, the pressure, building. It was like being pulled into an abyss, like I was sinking into the ground beneath me. The air was so thick I could barely breathe. I reached the end of the hallway and crashed into the door at the farthest end. It wasn't locked. I shoved it open, but when I stepped into the room, I stopped dead in my tracks. I was back in room 8. How was that possible? The walls were the same. The furniture. The creaking ceiling fan. And the door behind me slammed shut as I stepped inside. I turned around, and I was alone again. The hallway was gone. The figure was gone. But I wasn't safe. Because I could still hear the whisper. It was coming from inside the room. "Leave, now." I stood frozen, the room spinning around me as the whisper echoed in my ears. I didn't know if I was hearing it in my mind or if it was truly coming from the walls, but it didn't matter. The dread that filled me felt real, too real. My breath was shallow, every inch of my body screaming to run, to escape, but there was no escape. Not anymore. I turned slowly, eyes scanning the room for anything out of place. Nothing. The bed was the same. The lamp flickered dimly, casting long shadows across the floor. The cracked mirror still hung above the sink, the reflection fractured like my sanity. And then, I saw it. At the farthest corner of the room, near the small window, something was moving. A faint shape, just barely visible in the dim light. My blood ran cold as I took a step toward it, unsure if I could even trust my eyes. The shape began to take form. It was a figure, a body, but not a person. The skin was thin and stretched over bones, a color so pale it looked almost translucent. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if it was waking up after a long, disturbed sleep. And then I realized what I was looking at. It was the same figure from the hallway. The same thing. It had been in this room all along. I stumbled backward, tripping over the rug. My heart hammered in my chest as the figure turned toward me. It moved with a strange, jerking motion, like it wasn't quite human, like it was trying to remember how to walk. The air grew colder. I could see my breath in front of me, the room freezing in an instant. It spoke again, but this time, the voice was clearer, closer. "You can never leave." The words were like a weight, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I reached for the door handle again, desperate, my mind racing. I couldn't stay here. But the door wouldn't open. It didn't matter how hard I pulled or twisted, it was locked, and the lock wasn't just physical. It was something else. A force, a curse, keeping me inside. Keeping me trapped. I spun around, searching for any other way out, and that's when I saw the truth. The walls of the room weren't just old, decrepit. They were shifting. Like the room itself was breathing, expanding and contracting with every passing second. I felt the pressure growing again, pulling me toward the walls, toward the cracks in the floor. I wasn't sure what was worse, the thing in the corner or the feeling that the motel itself was alive, feeding off my fear. I turned back to the figure, but it was gone. The corner was empty. The shadows in the room seemed to pulse, and that whispering voice, it was everywhere now. Leave now, it urged. Before it's too late. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing for certain: if I didn't leave, I would never leave. I looked around desperately, the walls closing in tighter with every second. Then, I saw it. A crack. A small crack in the far corner of the room, just behind the dresser. It was barely noticeable, but it was there. Something about it felt different, like it could be an escape. Without thinking, I rushed toward it, my fingers digging into the wall, peeling away the old paint, the rotten wood. The crack widened with every movement, the air growing heavier with each second I spent there. And then, just as I thought I was free, I heard the final words, sharp and clear: too late. The crack snapped shut with a deafening sound, and the room went black. I don't know how long I was out. It felt like an eternity, dark, oppressive, with no sense of time. But when I finally regained my senses, the first thing I realized was that I wasn't in the room anymore. I was lying on the cold, hard floor, and the air around me was thick, damp. I could barely see anything, but I could feel the weight of the space pressing down on me. I slowly pushed myself up, my body aching like I had been lying there for ages. The room was different. The walls weren't decaying anymore. The bed wasn't where I remembered it. Everything felt new in a way I couldn't quite explain. But something felt wrong. Like a dream, where things looked familiar but nothing quite added up. I stumbled to my feet, my hands trembling. The last thing I remembered was the crack in the wall, the voice telling me it was too late. But now I wasn't in the same room. I was in a different place entirely. A place that was too clean, too untouched. It wasn't until I stepped closer to the window that I realized it wasn't the same motel. I was no longer in room 8. This room had no door. No hallway. No escape. It was a small, square space with just a window at one end, the glass cracked and streaked with dirt. But through the cracks, I saw something that made my stomach twist. The road outside, there was no road. There was nothing. Just an endless void. Like the world had stopped existing outside the motel, leaving me stranded in a pocket of space that didn't belong. I turned quickly, panic surging through me. The walls around me weren't solid, either. They shimmered like a reflection on water. For a moment, I thought I was losing my mind, but the sensation was real. I was in something wrong. The air, the light, the floor beneath me, all of it felt like a distorted version of reality. The voice came again, softer this time, but just as chilling. You can't leave, it whispered, its echo growing louder, vibrating in the walls. I backed away, my breath quickening. I was trapped, and this time, I couldn't even tell if it was a nightmare or reality. I tried the window again, shaking the dirt loose and attempting to pry it open, but it wouldn't budge. It was like the entire place was alive, holding me inside, feeding off my fear. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I froze. The moment I turned around, I saw it. The figure. It was standing in the center of the room, blocking the only exit. But it wasn't the same as before. It was worse. It was closer, somehow more solid, more real. Its twisted limbs stretched unnaturally, the skin now decayed and hanging loosely from its body, exposing raw, blackened muscle beneath. Its eyes, those eyes, were wide open, but they weren't eyes anymore. Just hollow, empty pits. Its mouth opened slowly, and the voice that came out was distorted, like 1,000 whispers combining into one. You never left, it rasped. And now, neither will you. I didn't have time to scream. I didn't have time to move. I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed with terror, as it reached toward me with those long, bony fingers. I thought for sure that this was it, that it was going to drag me into whatever nightmare it came from. But before it could touch me, something else happened. The walls around us started to crack. The entire room trembled, as if it were breaking apart, and for a split second, I thought I might be free. But the cracks didn't lead to the outside world. They led to something darker, something worse. A black void spilled from the walls, the room quickly filling with thick, choking darkness. I didn't know how, but I ran. I didn't think. I didn't look back. And for the first time since I arrived, I was running toward something. Toward the unknown. I didn't stop running. The darkness was swallowing everything, the walls warping and shifting around me like some kind of sickening illusion. Every step I took felt heavier, like the floor beneath me was trying to pull me down into the black void that was growing with every passing second. The figure was still behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I could hear its footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing in the suffocating silence. The whispering voice grew louder, calling my name in 1,000 different tones, each one colder than the last. I reached the door, but it was different now, twisted, covered in thick layers of grime, as if it had been there for centuries. I didn't hesitate. I threw my shoulder against it, my whole body slamming into the wood. The door groaned but didn't budge. It was locked, but not in the way a normal door would be. It was locked by something deeper, something that had no business being in the physical world. I pulled at the handle again, panic flooding my chest. The shadows were crawling up the walls, reaching for me, touching me with icy fingers that made my skin burn. I screamed, pulling at the door with everything I had, and then, it opened. A blast of cold air rushed in, tearing through the darkness, and for a split second, I thought I saw daylight. I didn't waste a second. I bolted through the door and into the outside world. But the world outside wasn't right either. I was no longer in the motel. The landscape stretched out before me, barren and desolate, a wasteland of cracked earth and twisted trees that seemed to reach toward the sky like skeletal fingers. The sun hung low, a dull, sickly yellow that barely illuminated the horizon. There was no road, no signs, just an endless expanse of emptiness. I spun around, expecting to see the motel behind me. But it was gone. Completely gone. The place I had just escaped from, it wasn't there anymore. The doors, the rooms, the hallway, it had all vanished, swallowed by the void that was now filling the space where the motel once stood. All that was left was the oppressive silence, the kind that made every breath feel like a crime. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still with me. That I wasn't truly alone. I turned back toward the wasteland. My only option was to keep moving. I had to get out, had to keep running, somewhere, anywhere, away from that thing. But then, I heard it again. A voice, faint at first, but growing stronger. You can't run. I looked up, and standing in the distance, outlined by the sickly light of the sun, was the figure. Its face was still hidden, but I could feel its gaze, heavy and suffocating, even from that far away. It wasn't just a man. It wasn't just a creature. It was something that existed between worlds. Something that couldn't be outrun. I turned and ran faster, pushing my body to its limits, but no matter how much distance I put between us, the voice was still there. The figure was still there, always just out of reach, always following me. I wasn't sure how long I ran, or if I was even going anywhere at all. Time had stopped making sense the moment I'd stepped into that motel, and now it felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, with no way to wake up. But then, just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I saw something, a flicker of light in the distance. I didn't know what it was. I didn't care. I had to reach it. I ran toward it with everything I had left, ignoring the voice that was now screaming at me to stop, ignoring the cold grip that seemed to reach into my chest. I focused only on that flicker of light, telling myself that if I could just get there, maybe, just maybe, I could escape. But the closer I got, the more I realized something. The light wasn't freedom. It was another door. The same door that had led me back to the motel. And I had nowhere left to run. I stood there, gasping for air, as the reality of it all hit me like a freight train. The light ahead wasn't salvation. It was just another door. Another way in. Another trap. And I had fallen for it, over and over again. I turned, trying to make sense of what was happening, but the landscape around me seemed to warp and twist with every passing second. The air was thick, the ground beneath me uneven. I could hear the whispers again, louder this time, echoing through the void. "You're not leaving." The figure was close now. I could feel it behind me, like a shadow that never left my side. The closer it got, the colder the air became, the more suffocating the atmosphere became. The whispers were turning into a roar. The walls of the void were closing in. And then, it spoke again, clearer than before. "You've already made your choice." I didn't understand. What choice? I turned toward the door, but the closer I got, the more I realized that this was no escape. It was the same door. The same damn room. Room 8. The hallway. The walls, shifting, breathing, closing in on me again. The figure stepped forward, its presence growing stronger, more oppressive. I was trapped. The door was no longer an option. The walls were closing in again. There was nowhere left to run. And then, the voice was suddenly right behind me, a deep rasp in my ear. "Now you stay. Forever." The figure reached out toward me, its cold, bony fingers grazing my shoulder. But instead of pulling me into the darkness, I felt something shift inside of me. Like a breaking point, a moment when everything finally made sense. And then, I realized it. I had been waiting for it. All along. The choice had always been mine.